you picture Roman justice as a single moment. Sand, steel, a roaring crowd. Life or death decided by a thumb. But that image is a lie of omission. For most of Rome's condemned, there was no arena, no crowd, no swift end. There was a sentence designed to erase you before it killed you. A punishment carried out in darkness, measured in years, not minutes. A living death that built an empire while destroying the people trapped inside it. Rome did not believe in second chances, not in mercy, not in rehabilitation. To understand what happened to those condemned before the arena ever came into question, you have to forget everything modern prisons represent. In the Roman mind, punishment wasn't meant to fix you. It was meant to unmake you. Prisons existed, but only briefly. Cold stone chambers where you waited, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, not to be released, but to be assigned a fate. Execution was one option, public spectacle was another, but there was a sentence far worse than death. One the Romans reserved for people they wanted to disappear without noise or sympathy. The moment a judge pronounced condemnation to the mines, your life ended in the eyes of the law. Your name was struck from civic records. Your citizenship vanished. Any property you owned became state property. Your marriage no longer existed. Your children were no longer legally yours. You were not considered alive, yet you were forced to keep breathing. Roman jurists were clear about this. You were no longer a person. You were classified as a thing, a tool, an object owned by the state, no different in legal standing than a cart or a hammer. Before you ever saw a mine shaft, you were already dead on paper. This sentence wasn't rare. It was handed down to criminals, to political enemies, to prisoners of war, and increasingly to Christians, whose refusal to worship Roman gods marked them as dangerous. Early Christian writers described the mines not as punishment, but as prolonged execution stretched across years. What made this system truly terrifying was its logic. Rome needed metal, silver for coins, gold for temples, iron for weapons, lead for pipes, marble for monuments. Mining was brutal work that killed free laborers quickly. So the empire solved the problem efficiently. It fed its enemies into the earth and extracted wealth from their bodies until they broke. The mines of Spain, Egypt, Greece, North Africa, these weren't just punishment sites. They were the beating heart of the imperial economy. The coin in your hand, the marble in a temple wall, the metal in a legionary sword. All of it passed through hands that no longer officially existed. This wasn't chaos. It was organized, calculated, profitable. And once sentenced, your final journey began. Chained at the neck and ankles, you were attached to a line of other condemned prisoners and forced to march hundreds of miles, weeks on foot. Guards did not slow down. If you stumbled, you were dragged. If you couldn't stand, you were beaten. If you still didn't move, you were killed where you lay. By the time convoys reached the mines, entire sections of prisoners were already gone. Those who survived arrived broken, exhausted, and terrified. And that was before the real punishment even began. The first thing you noticed at the mines wasn't the darkness. It was the smell. Sulfur, smoke, rotting waste. Human bodies pressed together for so long they had forgotten what clean air felt like. It was a stench so heavy it made new arrivals retch before they ever lifted a tool. Then you saw the workers, or what was left of them, men who no longer looked human, bones pushing against skin, limbs twisted from years of strain, eyes dulled by exhaustion and despair. Some had been there months, others years. All of them were trapped until their bodies failed. There was no orientation, no rest. You were handed crude tools and immediately sent underground. The mines descended deep into the earth, sometimes hundreds of feet, into spaces where daylight had never existed. Oil lamps offered barely enough light to see the rock in front of your face, filling the air with thick smoke that burned your lungs with every breath. Heat crushed down on you. Temperatures soared. Sweat soaked your clothes within minutes. Combined with suffocating humidity, men collapsed regularly. When someone fell, guards didn't stop the work. They dragged the body aside or left it where it lay until the shift ended. You worked 10, sometimes 12 hours at a time, always chained. Every movement had to match the pace of the others bound to you. The chains weren't just to stop escape, they ensured efficiency. If one man failed, Everyone suffered. If the tunnel collapsed, multiple prisoners died together. Rome calculated loss in groups, not individuals. The quotas were impossible. You were expected to extract more stone, more ore, more metal than a human body could sustain. Failure meant beatings. Compliance meant slow death. Either way, there was no path out. The air itself was killing you. Fine dust filled the tunnels, coating your lungs day after day. You began to cough, then cough blood. Within months, breathing felt like drowning while standing upright. Many never understood what was happening to them. They only knew that each breath hurt more than the last. Cave-ins were constant. The Romans used fire to heat the rock, then shattered it with cold water. It weakened the tunnels, making collapse inevitable. When sections fell, no one came to rescue you. The shaft was sealed. New tunnels were cut elsewhere. The dead remained where they were, buried with their tools still in their hands. Food came once a day. A small piece of bread, barely any water. Enough to keep you moving, never enough to recover. Men lost a third of their body weight in months. You watched the strongest prisoners fade first. Their strength burned away faster than the weak. At night, you were herded into underground barracks, livestock pens, in everything but name. Dozens packed together in chains, lying in filth. No sanitation, no medical care. Wounds festered. Disease spread unchecked. If you were sick, you worked until you collapsed. If you collapsed, you were left behind. Most survived 6 months. Some lasted a few years. Almost no one endured longer. This wasn't failure of the system. This was its success. The Romans made sure these people vanished completely. Records were meticulous for taxes, for land, for trade. But for the condemned, there was silence. Names were not preserved. Stories were not written. Erasure was part of the sentence. What survives are fragments. A name scratched into a papyrus. Serapion, condemned to the mines for theft. Nothing else. No explanation. No family. No ending. Christian writers mention martyrs sent to remote mines, writing letters filled with desperation and faith to people they would never see again. Archaeology reveals what documents refuse to record. In the tunnels, prisoners carved messages into stone, tally marks counting days. At one site, the marks stop at 237. No one knows why. At another, 2 simple words cut into the wall. Remember us. A plea sent forward 2,000 years, hoping someone, someday, would notice. There were children too. Roman law allowed entire families to be condemned. Skeletal remains show children as young as 8 bearing the same mining injuries as adults, growing up in darkness, learning to swing a hammer before learning to read, never knowing daylight is anything but a memory. This is where the illusion of the arena collapses. The Colosseum was not the heart of Roman punishment. It was theater. Condemnation to the beasts happened in public, fast, violent, and brief. The victim died within minutes. Expensive animals, no economic return. The mines were different, hidden, quiet, profitable. No audience, no sympathy. People simply disappeared and continued working until they didn't. Roman legal texts debated which punishment was harsher. Many concluded the mines were worse precisely because they lasted longer. Gladiators were something else entirely. Trained fighters. Investments. Fed, housed, treated when injured. Some became famous. Some earned freedom. The condemned never crossed into that world. A body broken by months underground was useless for spectacle. As Christianity spread and public executions began stirring discomfort, judges increasingly favored mine sentences, not out of compassion, because the mines solved everything neatly. No crowds, no martyrs, just labor and silence. The scale was immense. Dozens of major mining operations across the empire. Spain, Greece, Egypt, North Africa, Sardinia. Over centuries, hundreds of thousands were condemned. Some scholars say over 1 million. People erased so thoroughly that even their deaths became invisible, and yet their labor built wonders. Silver funded armies. Gold paid for monuments. Marble-shaped temples that still stand. The wealth of Rome flowed upward from the deepest darkness, from hands that history refused to name. The Romans didn't see themselves as villains. They believed in law, order, civilization. They built roads, aqueducts, literature, art. They told themselves the empire was worth the cost, that some lives were tools, not people. That is the real horror. Not that Rome was cruel, but that it was rational, efficient, certain of its own righteousness. The Colosseum still stands. Tourists walk its corridors, cameras flash. But the mines remain holes in the ground, scattered bones still wrapped in iron. No monuments, no applause, only silence. Those condemned to the mines died twice, once in the dark, and again when history chose not to remember them. And that silence should echo louder than the roar of any arena, because every empire decides who counts as human, and every empire tells itself the cost is justified.